Okay. We're here.
We're here.
This is our first episode.
Hello.
How are you feeling?
I'm doing well. I'm excited, maybe a little nervous. We'll see
fantastic.
how it goes.
I don't think anyone cares.
Oh, good. How do you feel?
Good.
Great.
Good. So this is episode 0
Yes.
because animators usually start at 0. There's a big debate about that.
That's
though.
a debate,
I know,
yeah.
I know. I start at 0. Mm-hmm. Let's jump in. Before we jump in, we have a bunch of stuff to talk about. So who are we?
Yeah.
First
what are we
question.
doing?
Who are we? And what makes us qualified to even make this podcast? Who is Kathryn Taccone?
Oh, I see.
And why are you here?
Right. So I'm here because I have served as a character animator for probably the last decade in the industry, just to age myself there. Over the last 6 years since starting OpenPixel, my role has pivoted not just from character animator, but I've added so much more. I've become a motion graphics artist. I've become a project manager, and I've become a marketer. And, sales executive, kind of helping out as entrepreneurs do. But yeah, we've worked on, I want to say in my career, I've probably worked on at least a couple hundred projects in any given time. So I've seen a lot on the side of like producing very large projects, working on pieces for 8 months at a time, all the way down to things that take 2 weeks. So I've seen a lot of the different management styles over the years of how you manage projects large and small and all the communication challenges that come in between.
You have had large industry experience in other places. You maybe want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I've worked at, small studios that were, I started in a barn a while back. A barn, yeah. Working next to the farm, chickens, and, you come a long way. And then I made the move out to California, working at places like EA and Toys for Bob. So a very big shift going from like 10 employees to then 90 to 150 to 2,000 to all the way back down to OpenPixel where we had just 3.
Yeah, right.
So very different experiences for sure.
Very different. Cool.
What about you?
Yes. So I've had a lot of experience outside of animation. I used to work in the sales department for AT&T. I would do
that must
sales
have been fun.
at the height of like right when iPhone was coming out. I had to both teach, explain, and introduce the older generation and younger generation about what an iPhone was. So a lot of experience there on communicating with people, talking through really complex technologies and things like that. I worked at a nonprofit called ABCD. That was a very, very short thing, but I worked as a sort of a forward-facing person to a very specific program there called the Summer Works program. And so I had to deal with a lot of parents and people like that. Where else did I work? I mean, I've had some...
I think you've told me you've had like 16 different jobs.
I've had about 16 to 17 different jobs in my lifetime. And I'm pretty young.
Not to age ourselves,
Yeah. But in terms of animation, so I used to work at Anziman Studio here in Florence, Massachusetts. That was a little while ago. I was an animator there, mostly lighting and compositing. I went to school for lighting and compositing, sort of 3D work, and landed the job there and really learned so many different things. But aside from project management, I took on motion graphics and learned a lot around that.
Sure.
And then we started OpenPixel, and through OpenPixel, we've worked on so many different types of clients. We're talking small clients, nonprofits. We're talking large clients, lots of large sort of Fortune 500 companies that would hire agencies, marketing agencies, production companies who would then hire us. So it was like this really big chain of command depending on what type of client you were working on. We started this podcast. What's in it? The question I think that inevitably everyone will ask is, why are we doing this? What's the point? And so what's in it for us? Let's go the selfish route. What are we doing?
It's always about us, right? I mean, yeah, I think for us it's an opportunity to be able to really shine some transparency on what some of the communication challenges that we have are with both within our own teams and with our clients, and how we want to be able to mitigate some of those challenges, to be able to basically streamline our process. So what's in it for us is being able to break down cohesively the work that we do, why we do it, and how to navigate just the challenges there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand that internally we have what we call a pains database. And through that database, what we're basically trying to do is address all the pains that come up frequently or, sometimes sporadically, but that are very important across all of our clients. And we work with a lot of different types of clients. So we work with nonprofits, we work with businesses, we work with agencies, marketing agencies, and sort of strategic agencies, and other production studios. So across the board, there are these things that are popping up that we keep a track of, keep a log of. And the podcast is really a way for us to explain some of those things at scale. Right, we're trying to address these issues at a larger scale.
But then, so what's in it for them?
What's in it for them? You're asking me.
Yeah.
Oh, what's in it for them? Well, hopefully, I think what's going to happen is you're going to learn a little bit more about our process. You're going to learn a little bit more about us, who we are as people. But we're hopefully teaching you ways in which to communicate better with the creatives and the marketers on both sides of the aisle. And we can get into that a little bit, but you're going to learn a lot. That's the goal here. So I also didn't mention that I have a teaching background as well.
Right.
And background is a strong word, but I've taught at the college level here, the 5 colleges. I've taught animation, both 2D, 3D, and sort of a business and animation course.
I would say it's a natural complement to our values because education is kind of at the core of what we want to be able to provide.
Absolutely.
Whether that's education for, future employees, future interns, future clients, ourselves. We want to be able to educate ourselves in a lot of ways.
It's the only way to scale.
That's true.
Yeah, it's the only way to scale.
Yeah. I think we should break down basically the structure of each episode so that you get a sense of what to expect. So the structure basically breaks down by, at the very beginning, we're going to give you sort of a summary, description, agenda of what we're going to cover in that episode.
We'll have a topic.
We'll have a topic to cover in particular. We'll go in depth about it. But we're coming at it from 2 different perspectives. You can think about it from one person is going to play the role of the marketer, saying their perspective, how they think and feel, how they're acting in certain situations. The other person is going to play the role of the creative. We're going to have hopefully pretty enlightening, in-depth discussions and trying to come at it from our own perspectives and our own experiences that we've seen throughout the projects that we've worked on.
Exactly right.
So once we go through that, we'll go through each side, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with a summary and give you a taste of what's to come for the next episode.
Yeah, a little bit more about the episode type. So as you're scrolling through the list of episodes on either on Spotify or wherever, you'll see there's a little bit of a tag in front of the episode. So BYB stands for before you buy or before you begin.
No, before you begin, yeah.
Yeah, either one.
Mm-hmm.
Before you begin.
I see what you mean.
Yeah. It's the idea is that before you get into something, you should learn this. Before you purchase any animation.
Mm-hmm.
At AMAs, obviously we're going to be running AMAs with some community building exercises that will have people come in, talk with us, ask us things that they might want to know.
Just for reference there, in case somebody doesn't know, AMA stands for Ask Me Anything. Just throwing that out. I don't know who wouldn't know that, but I want to provide, especially because we might get into acronyms in the future.
That's true.
We should always define acronyms.
You never want to confuse that with the American Manufacturing Association.
Or the American Marketing Association.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hey,
see, there's a lot. There's always a lot.
There's also hacks. Hacks are really short episodes where we're talking about really quick solutions to really common problems.
Yeah, tips and tricks.
And then one-on-one, we'll have interviews. We're going to try to find, we have some people lined up already, but we're going to try to find more of our clients who will come on, talk to us, talk through some of the issues that they usually have on either side. So sometimes it's a creative person, sometimes it's a marketing person, and we're going to talk about. So one thing we should do is kind of describe marketing and creative. We kind of throw those words around, but we want to make sure that we explain how we're thinking about those 2 roles.
Yeah.
So let's go with marketing first because that's easy.
Yeah. So when we talk about marketing and when we take the role of a marketer, in this case, we are referring to any marketing and communication professionals who are working at either firms or agencies or nonprofits or businesses. and they either have already or they're looking to utilize animation for their businesses.
Yeah,
and
so,
in their campaigns.
So it's important to think about the marketer as just a communication professional. I mean, almost always, I think originally it was called communications, and then it moved into this idea of marketing.
Right.
So if you're in the nonprofit space, you're probably going to be a communications person almost always. They don't usually call it a marketing person. If you're inside of a business or a firm, you're a marketing person for the firm. But if you're inside of a marketing agency that does marketing for particular businesses, then you're probably within that all kinds of different roles. So you can be a marketing professional, you can be an analyst, you can be someone in there. But everyone who's in that world should benefit in some way from this podcast is kind of the idea. Yeah. And we're always going to be talking about, I'll put this right in the middle, we're going to be talking about this through the lens of animation, because animation is inherently a collaborative medium.
Always.
Collaborative medium. You can hire one person to do everything, and that is fine. But if you have the collaboration there, your pieces are 100% going to be much better than anything else that one person could do on their own. And we'll get into that about how they collaborate. But it's designers, it's sound people, it's voiceover people, it's animators, it's project managers.
Right.
All of these even different roles.
Yeah, because I can even acknowledge, just like even if you are working with one person, the collaboration can come through in the stages of development, in the communication. So it is required no matter what you're doing on a project.
True. Okay. And then so we toss around the word creative a lot. And sometimes that can get confusing.
Yeah, it's especially nowadays, it's a very broad term.
Oh my God.
Right? It can encompass so many different types of people. But for the sake of the podcast,
how do we define it?
Yeah, so for us, it's basically all of the roles that specifically go into animation content creation. So for us, that means on the creative side, so to speak, it's the animators, graphic designers, motion graphic artists, the rigging artists, the character designers. There's like a whole range. There's tons of roles out there.
Yeah, which is why we sort of encompass it under creatives.
Yeah.
The creative person, in a marketing firm and an agency, they're usually calling the creative the piece of content. It's the thing that they're looking at. And so I just want to twist that just a little bit in your minds so that you're thinking about the person instead of the work for this podcast. Because most often we're going to be talking about the person.
Yeah, and we'll do our best to keep that in check as we go through.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, that can also, I just want to acknowledge too, that can also mean on the creative side, we're talking about the leadership within a creative project. So that's creative directors, project managers on the animation production side, because there are project managers on the marketing side. So that's just something to keep in mind. We'll try to do our best to make sure that we're very clear about who we're referring to in each point of view.
Cool. So this first episode, we're talking about the marketing and creative gap.
Yes.
The gap between marketing and creative. And again, we're talking about it from those roles, the people who are doing the communication, maybe buying the creative content from someone who's actually making the creative content, and there's a gap there.
Right.
I've seen a lot of stuff come in the form of tutorials and classes and courses at universities and all of these different ways to learn both of these crafts, right? So there's the creative side of learning. So you're doing, maybe you're working in Maya or After Effects or, all these sort of tools, new tools. Marketers are starting to become more creative, and they're getting allotted these like other responsibilities.
Yes.
And I'm saying that really
on top
nicely.
on top of the busy schedule they already have.
Yeah. And so now they're having to do sort of Figma work or what's the other one?
That
Figma
other tool.
And there's another tool.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Maybe they're not winning that much. Anyway.
The power of the internet.
So a lot of marketers are being asked to be more creative with their content. They're either, being pushed to learn some animated stuff. They're given some templates to use to make some more creative stuff. So they're starting to move more towards creating content. And you got the marketer over here who's like really trying to do all the analytics and thinking about the psychology around the product and the person and how am I going to communicate this particular message to that person
in the right tone, in the right way.
And there's these two elements, and I think there's this huge gap that we can start to address. So
yeah, we should get, I think, more into maybe the like we can specifically address it through like a problem that comes across, which is pretty straightforward across the board. I think a lot of people will hopefully resonate with that because we've experienced it ourselves. So let's say you as a creative, if you're taking the role of the creative here, Will.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So you as a creative, you're going to be presenting some work. You present it to your internal boss. Maybe that's your creative director, let's say.
Sure.
You go back and forth through different changes or revisions as needed, or
bring on that feedback.
Yeah, or the best day ever when they're like, "It's perfect." Just
no notes.
No notes.
No notes. Push it through.
What a day. Yeah. So then it gets approved by the creative director. Creative director says, "Okay, we're ready to take it to the client."
Yeah.
And the client.
Take it upstairs.
Yeah. Right. You use the term upstairs.
I use the term take it upstairs.
Why don't you explain what that means? Yeah.
Yes. Anytime someone is going to take your work from a creative perspective, you've made the work. You're the creative person. You've made the work. Someone takes your work, takes it to another person who's above them, gets approval, goes further up probably, maybe to another person, gets approval, goes to legal, gets approval. That's every single step up there. That's another floor in
another stair. Yeah.
So you're going upstairs.
Cool.
Take it upstairs.
But then, of course, what happens is that the client will probably come back with changes.
Comes back down with all these bunch of red marks. You thought it was done. It's Friday night. You have Friday night plans, and now you're screwed because you can't. You got to stay. You got to stay, and you got to fix it because we are on deadline.
You hate to see that.
You hate to see it. And so what do? You're going to miss Avatar, The Last Waterway. What's it called?
Last Waterway.
The Last Waterway.
I think that's what it's called,
I'm
right?
pretty sure that's what it's called.
We'll check it on the internet later
Last
and make sure
Waterway.
it's totally the right name.
Right.
Right. So that's typically what's happening, and there's a lot that's happening within there in terms of communication and all.
We can't cover it in this podcast.
No.
Not in this episode.
Well, yeah.
We're going to cover it in the podcast.
Episodes to come.
As different places, but yeah.
But right. So that's a challenge on the creative side is working through those changes and having it affect and impact them in a way that maybe they weren't expecting for.
Right. And so from the marketer's perspective, what do you hear? What do you experience when you get the creative?
So when I get creative, whether it's myself looking at it and making changes or whether my superiors are making changes, I'm typically getting from our perspective, really reasonable requests that we have. Right. Maybe because we're thinking about it from a certain graphic or a certain icon not matching the right branding that we're going for, or, something that needs to be changed because the tone has changed, or there's a direction shift happening in either the world or in the campaign, or there's a lot of different places that the perspective of my change can be coming from. So
what also happens upstairs is that you have a bunch of people, CEOs, CMOs, VPs of marketing. You have all of these eyeballs on your work. As a marketer, you have it on the strategy side. How are you targeting our customers? What's the return? How much are you spending? That all those metrics. But there's the creative part of it, which they're judging kind of your outcomes on in a way. Right. So you get
but basing it through our own lens, right? Wanting to make sure that it's the best piece we can possibly make for the audience that we're targeting, which means that typically as a marketer, I might not have as much awareness or understanding about how my change that I'm requesting that seems reasonable to me might be impacting the creative's work that they're doing.
Right. And not just the work, but the human who's doing it.
Yeah. Right. Because I might not realize that it's going to impact their Friday plans because in my head it's, that's that, change out that character. That's super quick, right?
Yeah, super fast.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
So we're kind of in this situation where, there's another layer where we have to provide feedback really quickly while having that limited understanding of what's going into the process. And sometimes that's in our control. Sometimes that's out of our control. And quite honestly, me as a marketer, I don't have time to learn every single thing that you do and understand why you're doing it, or I don't even know how to speak animation in that way.
Yeah. Or sometimes even creative.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I think you're not expected to, but you have all this stuff to learn. I mean, I've picked up, I don't know if you know this, I've picked up the recorder.
Oh, have you?
Yes.
Oh,
I'm
interesting.
learning how to play the recorder.
So you can join my Dungeons and Dragons campaign where
Fluties.
let me just say, as a bard, anytime you have the opportunity to bust out a recorder.
I think you lost them at D&D.
No. We're nerds, come on. Yes, recorders are great. Very silly.
So neither side is expected to learn these things. I think the creative side, you're not expected to learn all the strategy. You didn't go to school for strategy. You went to school to express yourself and, learn how to hone a tool or maybe a few tools. Some of the people working on the creative side are doing like self-taught learning stuff all the time. Like you're learning new skills all the time. On the marketing side, you're probably really into numbers and psychology and figuring out business and spreadsheets.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you don't really have time to learn creative,
But you shouldn't be expected to.
You shouldn't be expected to.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's really time for like both sides of the table here to kind of understand that the other side might not really understand what you're doing or why you're doing it.
No one knows what the heck anyone's doing. I think that's
at all points in
what
time
we're trying to get to. No one really knows how the marketers do their work, and marketers don't agree about how to do the right work, and a bunch of creatives also don't agree on.
Because on both sides, there's so many different ways to teach creative and to teach marketing.
So many ways to teach animation. So many ways to teach.
Think about all the different acronyms within animation or within marketing. There's so many. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's all okay. I want to, let's put that on the table that's fine. That we don't know, and let's just sit with that for a moment. It's okay. It's going to be fine.
So one of the things I think as creatives, we do not do enough is that we're not good. I'll just talk directly to my audience here. Creatives are not good at explaining what they're doing to a marketer, to a strategy person, to a communications person. We're not doing a good enough job at explaining what changes can and can't happen. Now, that's a broad statement. It might be that you as a creative have a really good process and you know exactly what to say and how to say it, and so that everyone on the other side understands what can and can't be changed. But for the most part, I think, broadly speaking, we just don't do that good of a job.
Well,
because it's complex. It's really complex.
But you can also take it from if you think about it for a second as a creative, like I can probably think back to all the different times that I've gotten like just really unclear, unfocused, kind of crazy feedback over the years. And I think that came down to me not being able to explain what constitutes,
crazy feedback. What's crazy feedback?
Right.
Yeah. What's the worst feedback you've gotten?
Well, I don't want to say the worst feedback, but some feedback that I've gotten was like unclear in terms of like, can you make this look cooler? And so what does that mean? Yeah. Are you talking about physically colder, like now it's going to be a winter scene instead of a fall scene? Are you talking about cooler in color and,
No, we need explosions.
Right, Michael Bay. Yeah.
Michael Bay is
I'm gonna hit a side note for that for later for my opinion about something Michael Bay should be doing. So we'll talk about that at the end.
Stay tuned for Michael Bay opinions.
Exactly.
Right.
But yeah, basically it's the idea that, and we'd love to hear from any creatives about like confusing or crazy feedback that they've gotten over the years.
What kind of crazy feedback have you gotten?
Yeah.
If you're on YouTube, so our podcast is also on,
feel free to leave a comment.
Podcast, but also on YouTube, we're doing this as a YouTube video and channel. Mm-hmm. Leave it in the comments.
Yes.
Leave it in the comments.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So what kind of feedback do you need to empower you to make the best creative that you can? So I'm stating that as a sort of rhetorical question, because I think that's what you want to do as a marketing or a strategy person. You want to give the feedback that will allow your creative to resonate and create the things that they want to make. And so do you have a particular feedback style? Yeah.
So if I'm switching off marketer and I'm stating as a creative right now, my feedback style has always been like, I prefer to be like, just even the slightest acknowledgement for the work that has been put in to get to that point of like
compliment sandwich. You want a compliment
sandwich. It's kind of like that. It's kind of it doesn't have to be sometimes, but like it really starts with that. I need the acknowledgement and maybe appreciation of like, I see what you did to get to this point.
Yeah.
I just need that first. Then you can rip it apart.
That is not me at all. I want you to rip me a new one every single day, every single time, because I want to get to it. What's the issue?
Right.
What do you want me to do? I actually want you to be more assertive and don't ask me any questions in your feedback. Questions aren't feedback. They're
right.
questions.
And so that adds a layer of complexity on the marketer side.
Because you're just trying to be nice. You're really just trying to be nice. You're asking a question to be nice. What you really want to say is, do this.
For you though, right?
I don't know.
It's interesting.
I want to guess that a strategy person, a marketing person, someone who's in that chair, almost always has a very specific way of doing
right.
things.
So,
And so
you should also
tell
comment about your feedback styles because we'd love to know what you
Please
prefer.
tell us what your feedback style is. That would be great.
But yeah, so I want to say on the marketer side here that we have to remember that the marketers are typically under a lot of pressure.
These days, for sure.
Yeah. They're always under immense pressure to create and produce the outcomes that they need to produce for either their business or their clients.
That's right.
Right? And so we're kind of, as marketers, we're not understanding the complexity of what's going into that creative and what goes into what constitutes a small change versus a large change, and even how to just talk from that perspective of creative, because I'm always thinking about it from the side of strategy, how this is going to benefit my end client or how this is going to benefit the target audience. Does it make sense? Does it resonate?
You might know the basics, so like fonts,
right,
and brand color, and whether or not those are in the right place.
Yeah.
But what happens when they talk about like follow through?
Right. It's hard for me as a marketer to say like I can tell when something maybe feels wrong, but I'm not sure if the way that I'm giving the feedback is going to accurately get to the thing that I'm trying to get to.
Especially in animation.
Yeah.
Right? Because our eyes are so in tune to motion. We see it every day. We understand what it feels like. So when we feel it wrong, like when we know it's wrong, your eyes will not lie to you. Like, oh, that doesn't feel quite.
Yeah. And we'll get into that a lot for sure. Because the idea, like, I think we can both agree that we as owners and as creatives, we would be like blown away if a marketer came to us and was like, the follow through and overlap in this particular area at frame 45 isn't resonating. And I'd be like, what? Yeah. That's amazing. But, I don't expect that. That's
what we're trying to do here is we're trying to teach you a little bit, all the things that you kind of really need to know to communicate. That's all.
Yeah.
You don't need to learn the entire
right.
entire thing.
So to kind of like summarize what the main problem here is, the marketing creative gap that we're talking about is really miscommunication and a lack of education on both sides to understand each other's processes and what actually matters to them when we're both looking at the same piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And under the same emotional sort of stresses, under pressure, short on time, need to
maybe
make a
it's
deadline,
for different reasons,
right?
but yeah.
So what happens when we start closing this gap?
It's a good question. So
do you mind the gap? You have to mind the gap. Mind the gap.
Right.
I went to London for 3 months. I studied in London for 3 months.
There you go.
I was always minding the gap.
You have to. You don't want to be in a situation where you're on your phone and then you slip through the crack of
You never want to slip through the crack.
Wait, I just realized how that sounded. Okay, great. So, yes, how do we mind the gap? So, on the marketer side, I think it's important to start to understand the parts of the creative process that matter the most to us. And really just from a broad perspective, just to be able to communicate it a little bit more clearly, to understand what goes into that creative content, so you can kind of be ahead of the game at a production standpoint, knowing that something might constitute a big change. You can plan ahead for that and say, okay, I know that they're going to need more time, so maybe we need to like push the schedule a little further, or we need to like rein it back a little bit. It's almost like a vetting process a little bit.
And there are some great marketing and communications professionals out there who do have this experience, who have been really, who've worked with us, who really understand that difference.
Yeah. So basically it's trying to reduce, our ultimate goal is to try to reduce the conflicts in the production schedule within our internal teams, within your teams, with each other. Right. I also want to acknowledge that, like, that will also hopefully help to reduce the amount of feedback time that takes, which will therefore increase your ROI on your creative efforts.
Your ROI? Do
Yeah.
you mean the region of interest on a map?
No, that's a math thing.
Or release of information if you're in the medical field.
See, we're getting again into, there's so many acronyms. Yeah. So remember, ROI for creative.
Return
That's a lesson
on investment. For the creatives,
Yeah.
it's a return on investment.
Yes.
And most people know that these days.
That's true.
Yeah. Everyone's an entrepreneur these days.
Yeah. But yeah, so how can creatives get a little bit closer to the gap?
So in the podcast, we're going to try to close the gap for creatives so that they learn a little bit more about how marketers think, what strategies go into some of the marketing things that they do that include creative content. We're talking about campaigns and things like that. We're trying to explain so that you get a better understanding on how that strategy fits into the larger business structure so that you understand where some of those changes come from. I think a lot of creatives kind of think through their, like, here's what I'm making, and they're sort of in that world of like, here's the creative choices I'm going to make. And sometimes you don't think how those creative choices affect the future of the audience that you're pushing it out to, and
sure.
where the business is thinking about it. You're going to learn, hopefully, how to create work with the business perspective in mind. That's kind of it. Gain a deeper understanding about what's important to audiences and what's important to business owners and what's important to customers. And I think those are two different things. What's important to me as an artist is not the same as what's important to the audience that a company is trying to speak to,
right,
or that a nonprofit is trying to push forward. So, and it varies across organizations. So we're speaking broadly, but it's gonna. Yeah. And then the other part of it is hopefully we're going to give you a better sense of how to internally structure your work to think about the future changes that may come. And I think a lot of creatives, sort of when they're starting out, this is more for, less professional, like just starting out in their career, they don't think about future changes in mind. And so they don't build the creative in a way that actually allows that to happen.
Right. Or to be able to even like hand it off to another creative when that time comes.
Also.
The amount of times in my career that I've seen like, I've opened up a file and all the layers are named layer 1, layer 2, layer copy. Yeah.
Final.
Exactly.
_1.
Yeah. We can do better. Well, let's do better.
Yeah, so hopefully the podcast will address some of these issues in future episodes. The problems are all over the place, so we're not going to tackle all of them. We're just going to tackle the ones that we've experienced and talk through our experiences. And hopefully
from that animation lens.
Through the community building, we'll hopefully get some more insight on these types of problems.
Totally. Yeah, I think our ultimate goal is to be able to like provide some empathy for the people that you're working with on a day-to-day basis, to understand what it is that they need, why they need it, and to just come at it from a more human perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the responsibility lies on both sides to solve the problem.
Absolutely.
Right? We can't just, it's very easy to put like blame on one side versus another.
It's your fault. The creative's wrong.
Right, exactly. Well, it's your fault.
You didn't give me brand guidelines. Your guidelines are dumb.
You didn't give me source files. There's a whole sort of thing. Yeah. So I think it's really, the responsibility falls on both sides to understand that problem. And in order to actually solve it, it requires taking the time to listen to each other's perspectives, which hopefully you're going to get to hear both sides of it from this podcast.
Oh, here's the tease.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to do the tease.
I like the idea of in the podcast, we just say, oh, here's the tease.
Here's the tease.
Yeah.
Guys, here's the tease.
Yeah.
People, humans, here's the tease. The tease for the next episode is we'll talk about how businesses could best use animation and how the medium has already changed our lives.
Yes. And I want to make sure before we close out the episode, this is why I brought a notebook.
Oh, yeah.
I've written 2 words. It's Michael Bay. So let's make sure that Michael Bay is addressed. The one thing that I wanted to say about Michael Bay is that I truly believe, and I will stand by this statement for the rest of my life, that whenever the Olympics comes to America.
Ooh.
Michael Bay should direct it. Think about what that would look like.
Michael Bay's
There's going to be
Olympics?
monster trucks flying across the
Oh,
stadium
my God.
with like explosions everywhere, fireworks. It's going to be crazy.
I don't know who's
It's
in
going to
charge.
transform into a different
Wow.
vehicle.
You are on a roll.
Yeah. Oh, I could go on this for days.
Michael Bay, think of Olympics in the U.S. for your next project.
Yeah. Somebody signed the check for him.
Someone give it to Michael Bay. Absolutely. Absolutely.
There you go. Well, with that, we want you all to know. Thank you for listening.
Thank you
first
so much
off.
for being
We do want to say that this episode is produced by eMedia.
eMedia.
It is a creative production community space in East Hampton, Massachusetts. We've been loving it so far. If
Yeah.
you can, for anyone who is watching this as opposed to listening, you'll be able to see the space right here. It's pretty awesome.
It's pretty
we're,
awesome.
We're very happy with
Very
it.
happy.
So,
Thank you
yeah.
to Jackson Foote for
Yes.
producing the podcast
Yeah.
and the YouTube channel. All
Yeah.
of it, really. He's
Yeah.
been very helpful.
Absolutely. And yeah, with that, I think it's time.
Oh my God.
It's time to say our little catchphrase. And with that, stay honest,
Stay creative.
stay open.
Ugh. Okay.
You'll get through
We'll
it.
have to talk about that.